Hello, this is Sondra Oster Baras bringing you a few words of Bible from the heart of Biblical Israel. This week's Torah portion is Pikudei, and it is the final Torah portion of the book of Exodus. And I want to focus on the very last verses of this Torah portion, which talk about the final putting together, construction, finishing it all up, the tabernacle that is going to be finally erected right here in this end of this Torah portion. And there is a commentator, a very classic commentator, who talks about the meaning of the tabernacle and relates it to Revelation at Sinai, seeing that the purpose, shall we say, of the tabernacle is to continue the experience of revelation on a daily level. And you remember that at Mount Sinai, God appeared. There was fire and smoke and clouds and voices and God spoke the Ten Commandments, and there was a great requirement for everyone to be very careful. The nation could not approach the mountain. The priests and the elders could go a little bit closer to the mountain, but only Moses can go all the way up. He goes all the way up to the mountain. He disappears into the cloud of glory, which represents God's presence. And what we see in the tabernacle, and particularly in some of the language here at the very end of Exodus, we see elements in the description that remind us clearly of Revelation. So, for example, and we're in chapter 40 now, okay, verse 20. He took the testimony. Now, what is the testimony? The testimony are the tablets of the Ten Commandments. So he took the testimony and placed it in the ark. So this is one of the first things we do. We have it immediately reminding us what is in the ark. The ark is the Holy of Holies. It's the center of the tabernacle, and it's the one place where nobody can go, with the exception of Aaron the high priest. He can go there once a year. So it is in a very restricted place, okay? What is in the center of that restricted place is something that is hidden because it is in the ark that nobody can see. Even Aaron, he can enter the room, but he can't see what's inside the ark. That's the Ten Commandments. So from the outset, we have this immediate connection between the Ten Commandments given on Sinai and where those Ten Commandments will reside. They will reside at the heart of the temple or the tabernacle. That is what the heart of this whole thing is. Now, in verse 21, first of all, we see a lot of language here in these verses, referring to screening. For example, in verse 21, we're talking about a certain partition that acts as a screen, and it's a screen to block off where the ark is. And we know the ark is in the Holy of Holies, and there's a screen that is permanently in front of that so that nobody not only enters, but nobody can even see what is going on the other side of there. In verse 21, we have another screen that goes on, a screen that kind of covers the entire holies, which is the next section of the tabernacle. You have the table, and you have the menorah, and you have another screen over there. And lastly, in verse 33, there is a screen at the entrance to the courtyard. So that's yet another layer back. So we have layers of screens. And this, in many ways, parallels what happens at Sinai, where you have the nation standing in one place, you have the elders further in, and finally you have Moses, and Moses is the only one who goes all the way to the top. So again, you have this idea of distance, of the essence of God's presence in the center, but a sense of distance that has to be created that very few people, or if anyone, usually only one person, who can get closer. And just to kind of show that to you, let me go back to Exodus 24. Listen to the words here and see how much they remind us of what we're reading here at the end of Exodus. So this is Exodus 24, verses 15 and 16. When Moses had ascended the mountain, this is talking about Sinai. When Moses had ascended the mountain, the cloud covered the mountain. The presence of the Lord abode on Mount Sinai, and the cloud hid it for 6 days. On the 7th day, he called to Moses from the midst of the cloud. So here we already talked about the distance, etc. Now let's see what happens when Moses has completed building the tabernacle. When Moses had finished the work, I'm reading now from verse 34, the cloud covered the tent of meeting, And the presence of the Lord filled the tabernacle. This is so similar to what we read before. And when Moses ascended the mountain, the cloud covered on the mountain the presence of the Lord abode on Mount Sinai, and the cloud hid it. Okay, very, very similar kind of description of what's going on. But here we have something a little bit different. Previously, we have that Moses goes into the cloud. Here we have the following. Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled upon it, and the presence of the Lord filled the tabernacle. So Moses goes only so far, but when he encounters the center, the Holy of Holies, the center of the tabernacle, there's a cloud there. He cannot enter it. So what is the answer? And the book of Exodus ends with no answer. At the very last verse, for over the tabernacle a cloud of the Lord rested by day, and fire were appearing it by night in the view of all the house of Israel throughout the journeys. It seems to us that this is the end, whereas in Sinai Moses was able to go into the cloud. Here in the tabernacle he could only go so far. However, there are those who connect this very last verse with the first verse of the book of Leviticus, which begins, "The Lord called to Moses," and connects that with what we saw in Exodus 24. Verse 16. The presence of the Lord abode on Mount Sinai, and the cloud hid it for 6 days. On the seventh day, he called to Moses. And it's actually in Hebrew the very same. It's Vayikra. Vayikra. He called. Okay? And also in Leviticus, even though the English says the Lord called to Moses, it doesn't really say that. It says, and he called to Moses. It's exactly the same words. Vayikra el Moshe, Vayikra el Moshe. He called to Moses. Of course, we're talking about God, and that's very clear from the context in both verses. But in both verses, what we're seeing is there is a cloud. In Sinai, God calls to Moses, and he goes in. We see the connection from our Torah portion in next week's Torah portion in Leviticus, where God calls to Moses. And I think the message here is amazing, that the Mount Sinai, the amazing event of Revelation at Mount Sinai, is a unique one-time event. But the question is that the end? And by building the tabernacle, God has given us a place to re-experience Revelation at Sinai all the time. God's initial message to us when he commanded to build the tabernacle was, and you shall build a tabernacle so that I will dwell amongst, or they shall build a tabernacle so that I can dwell amongst them. And that indeed is the purpose. The purpose was that the one-time revelation of Sinai, in its amazingness and direct speaking of God and all that, that is not something that will ever happen again. However, God is creating a mechanism through the tabernacle where his presence will be felt amongst us all the time. And that is how we conclude the book of Exodus, with God's presence amongst us all the time. Have a wonderful weekend. Shabbat Shalom.
I hope you enjoyed that video, and we'd like to be sure you're getting all of our video content. So just click on the subscribe button below, as well as on the notification bell, and that way you will have easy access to all our material. We look forward to staying in touch with you. God bless you, and have a wonderful day.